People often ask about what exactly am I painting, and obviously there's no sound in a painting, but I can hear the music. I can sometimes painting, I'm thinking of particular tunes, and lots of people when they look at the painting say that they almost can hear the music, which I find great, because I can certainly hear the music. My paintings are unashamedly Irish subjects. Local people do identify with them, despite the fact that we do live in a culturally diverse society. I've been painting, I suppose, professionally since the late 1950s, which adds up to 50 years odd of painting. My work has always been painting. I've never had a job, or a proper job. I've always been able to paint, somehow or other survive as a painter. That's really my life, is painting. I grew up in Armagh. My painting started in Armagh, apart from a couple of years in Belfast Art College and then a few more years in Edinburgh. I've lived all of my life here. My early education in a place called Blundell's Grange, which is about 4.5 miles outside of Armagh, north of Armagh. And the reason I went to primary school there was because my father was the principal teacher there and he took me. So I was educated in a totally rural environment. And because of that, it was a wonderful experience, because the Grange, as we called it, was a great spot and very, very unique. It was like a few miles outside of Armagh, but it was, in terms of culture and everything, it could not have been more different. It was really, really, really a very isolated rural area with a lot of history and tradition and a lot of families going back hundreds of years, And really my painting started there because my father had a great interest in art and in painting and drawing and that, and he invariably illustrated all his classes with drawings, beautiful drawings on the blackboard. And he had a lot of interest in life, one of which was nature study, and another was history and mythology and all that. So in addition to the usual curriculum, we got art lessons and history lessons, and he also taught Irish. He had great ideas on how to teach Irish, even though it was most certainly not on the curriculum of any school, but he still included some classes in Irish, and he had good ideas on how to teach it, and his notebooks are full of his teaching ideas on teaching Irish, because he taught himself and he was a fluent Irish speaker. When I went to art school first, I just was interested in everything. It was a whole new experience. I loved every aspect of it. I loved still life and portrait drawing, all the rest of it, but at some particular stage we had to think of themes, and obviously what was always in my head, and that was Irish mythology, so I spent a lot of time, reading up and getting ideas from the literature, etc. And I painted a whole series of paintings, huge paintings, and the themes were always like the town, and the sons of Uisne and Deirdre and Oisin and Tiernan and all that. And at some stage in the middle of that whole progress, I was getting more and more interested in music. And I suppose the themes that dominated my life would have been my culture, my identity as being Irish. I felt that I wanted to paint what I knew, and then out of the blue, I started painting musicians, or painting the music, because it was the most vibrant expression of my culture, my life, what I liked in life, and it was distinctive. And I've been sort of on and off, been painting musicians ever since. First instrument that I really fell in love with was the flute, and I really wanted to play the flute. But at the back of my head I had the sound of the pipes in my ears, so it was easier to get a flute than pipes. You know, pipes are very hard to come by, but once I did get pipes, I got totally besotted by them, as they say, you know. They are an instrument that can really grow on you, and you don't have to be a fantastic player, but I was very interested in piping and teaching piping, also flute playing, so I would play the pipes probably most, and then play the flute, which I still like playing. And of course the tin whistle was a great introduction to music. I've painted paintings with all sorts of instruments, but there's a sort of a, you know, painting an accordion, you know, an accordion player sort of grows round the instrument, you know, and like the instrument nearly becomes part of him, you know, part of his upper body, and his arms go in round the back and come out and play the basses and all that sort of thing, you know. Traditional musicians, the way they hold themselves when they're playing is more organic, you know, possibly than classical players, even though classical players are obviously as deeply emotively involved in their music as traditional musicians. But even you look at photographs of an orchestra, you know, it's incredible music, but everybody is sort of almost at a remove from the music. You know, if you look at a group of traditional musicians playing, they're deeply engaged with the instrument, and they're all holding them slightly differently, but just playing it as it comes comfortably to them, you know. I belong to an association called the National Athletic and Cycling Association of Ireland, you know, so there was always cycling there as well, you know, and I was always attracted to cycling as a sport, even though my only cycling practice was cycling about the place. I never actually raced. I did organise a few cycle races, but the whole concept of cycling and touring, that captured my imagination, so I painted a lot of paintings of cyclists. Around Armagh we have a traditional sport called bullet throwing. It's a big sort of local community based sport, and so I grew up with that, so of course the bullet throwing featured in a lot of my subjects. And then of course Armagh's dominated. The most popular game was Gaelic football, so odd paintings of Gaelic footballers and hurlers, you know. The club that I founded in 1966, the Armagh Pipers Club, was born just in fact the Troubles really did start in 66. You know, a lot of my life has been touched by what's now called the Troubles, you know, but all my family were born, as I say, in the middle of the Troubles, you know. The Pipers Club and teaching music, organising athletics, all took place against that background, you know. I didn't really get involved in, what you might call politics, you know. I was involved in issues, you know, social issues and that, you know, and, you know, reared my family here in Armagh. We didn't go away, you know, and taught music. I wouldn't say that I grew up blinkered from the realities of what was going on around me, but I persevered with organising sport, athletics, and with organising music and teaching it. In fact, I got a lot of criticism from people who were more politically minded than I was, that how could I spend my time organising concerts and cross-country races and bicycle races and all this sort of thing, like when they were living in total mayhem, you know, etc. But I I presume I had something at the back of my head that when it all blew over, that, there were certain things in life, like the music, the culture, the athletics, etc., would thrive. So I persevered right up to the present day, and hopefully for the future, with organising music and sport, athletics. Basically, my themes have always come from my experience of life, really, the music, the mythology that I grew up with, the sport. Recently there I had a retrospective which covered 50 years of my painting, so it was interesting for me to actually see all those paintings and to sort of have a look at what I had done in painting and how things evolved, etc. It was quite special for me because it was the first and only exhibition I've ever had that was a sort of an overview of everything that I'd done. The venue that was chosen for the exhibition was quite a special one for me, in that it was in what was known as the old assembly rooms in Belfast. It was built in the mid-18th century. A lot of the history of Belfast and everything, including the musical history of Belfast, was tied up in that building. Most people would remember it or know it because in 1792 there was an event held there to celebrate the fall of the Bastille, in the French Revolution, in 1792, and they organised a harp festival, which was to bring together the last of the old harpers, and they came from various northern counties, Antrim and Down and Armagh, and they played in the assembly rooms. The event was organised by Henry J. McCracken, who is a member of a leading business family in Belfast, a Presbyterian, and a leading light in the United Irishmen. And he organised that harp festival and commissioned Edward Bunting to write down the tunes. I was really almost like sacred ground, and I was so delighted to hang my paintings in that particular spot. And then, in the course of the exhibition, a good friend of mine, George Holmes, he suggested that he would bring a group of harpers at some stage, and eventually that happened. The retrospective gave me an opportunity to sort of revisit my past, etc., and to bring out paintings that probably had never seen the light of day, And there was one room which basically covered the couple of years that I was in Belfast College of Art. Went all around Belfast and drew and painted everything, I had a few particular spots. One was down around the docks, and I did loads of drawings and paintings from the Queen's Bridge, when the boats used to tie up, and then you could look down into the coal yards and the cranes and all that, the whole commercial life of the city of Belfast as it was then, which is now totally gone. There's not a vestige of that left, So I was delayed then. I went through my old sketchbooks and discovered all these things that I'd done, 1959 and 60 and that. And I was delighted to get the opportunity. I got them out and got them framed up and showed them. And very, very different to things that I did since, but I was very, very pleased with those, and that sat in sketchbooks and portfolios for basically nearly 50 years, and then before they saw the light of day, as it were, During the exhibition, there was a lot of memorable things happened. I met lots of people who I'd never met before, even people I went to school with, people who had bought paintings 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, people who maybe bought paintings in the last 10 years but had absolutely no notion about what that had maybe 30 or 40 years of painting before they'd ever seen my painting, and they were quite intrigued, and had lots of interaction, record numbers of people, like the sort of the head count at the end of the exhibition, something like 5,000 people visited it, which was quite gratifying, because if you talk to any of the gallery owners in Belfast or the Arts Council or anything like that, that you don't really, after an opening night, get more than a handful of people ever come in, but there were some days there was nearly 200 people. And then there was one memorable day, when a whole crowd of children from one of the Gael School in Belfast came, and a total of 84 arrived. I was quite amazed, because they were quite young children, but they were very, very focused and disciplined, and spent their whole time going around looking at the paintings and doing their versions of the paintings, which they reckoned they were much better than mine. Fiddlers and pipers and all the rest of it, and they asked quite intelligent questions, and but they were very, very focused, disciplined, because when I'd heard this whole crowd of children were coming, I said, that they'll be running riot around the place, but they didn't. And with music that day as well, and they sat round and listened to the harpers, and there was a great buzz about the place. In the course of my life, I've travelled over a fair amount of the world. I've lived outside of Armagh, but there's something about Armagh that I couldn't live really anywhere else. And there's lots of things about Armagh. Armagh has it's an amazing mythological past, historical past, religious past. It also has a sort of a more recent heritage of built Armagh, of buildings, 18th century, 19th century buildings, but it also has monuments going back thousands of years, like the Navan Fort, etc. I feel very happy in Armagh. It's a great ambience about it. It's a beautifully designed city. It hasn't changed much. The earliest drawings of Armagh could be superimposed on modern Armagh, and the whole street patterns are the same. It also has the distinction of being the only identifiable place in the island of Ireland on the oldest map of Ireland, which was the famous, I think, the 3rd century map drawn by Ptolemy. And the only place that can be identified with any certainty is Armagh, or Armagh. So, despite the fact that that generation after generation after generation of my family have been from Armagh, and specifically from in or around Armagh, the last 5 generations have been here, but countless other generations before that were from Loughgall and Claddymore, and that this is sort of the whole valley name originates from. And I think it has a big influence on my work. I'm just conscious that this is where I come from, and it's in the family blood for hundreds of years. I've been lucky in a sense, because when you grow up somewhere, you're marked. People say, well, I knew him, or I knew his father, or all this sort of thing. But right from the first time I exhibited in Armagh, I was conscious that people from every cultural background related to what I was doing. They liked the musical paintings, they liked the sports paintings, they liked the bullet throwing, any painting that I would do, or footballers or hurlers or anything like that. It would sell, as they say, but people liked it, so I've always sort of been very, very conscious of my Irish identity, the fact that I was born in Armagh, the name Vallely goes back in its Gaelic form back to pre-Christian times, so I've no doubt about my identity. I'm always very, very pleased at the fact that I am accepted in Armagh, and my neighbours like what I do. And I just recently invested in a huge consignment of canvases and paints, because I have lots more to paint. So. In terms of culture and everything, it could not have been more different. It was really, really, really a very isolated rural area with a lot of history and tradition, and a lot of families going back hundreds of years. And really my painting started there because my father had a great interest in art, in painting and drawing and that, and he invariably illustrated all his classes with drawings, beautiful drawings on the blackboard. And he had a lot of interest in life, one of which was nature study, and another was history. Started in Armagh, apart from a couple of years in Belfast Art College and then a few more years in Edinburgh. I've lived all of my life here. My early education in a place called Blundell's Grange, which is about 4.5 miles outside of Armagh, north of Armagh. And the reason I went to primary school there was because my father was the principal teacher there, and he took me. So I was educated in a totally rural environment. And because of that, it was a wonderful experience, because the Grange, as we called it, was a great spot, and very, very unique. It was like a few miles outside of Armagh, but it was people often ask about what exactly am I painting, and obviously there's no sound in a painting, but I can hear the music. I can sometimes painting, I'm thinking of particular tunes, and lots of people when they look at the painting say that they almost can hear the music, which I find great, because I can certainly hear the music. My paintings are unashamedly Irish subjects. Local people do identify with them, despite the fact that we do live in a culturally diverse society. I've been painting, I suppose, professionally since the late 1950s, which adds up to 50 years odd of painting. My work has always been painting. I've never had a job, or a proper job. I've always been able to paint, somehow or other survive as a painter. That's really my life, is painting. I grew up in Armagh. My painting started